Guys, as promised, we did not get to finish our read aloud book before we started our holiday break. So I promised you that I would finish the last 4 chapters. So today I will read chapter number 5. I know we're on the second part of the book, so it's like the second chapter number 5, but I will go ahead and read chapter number 5 as I promised, and I will keep posting the rest of the chapters over break and maybe some even more surprise read alouds. So, chapter 5. The next morning, George and Kevin woke to the sound of the vacuum cleaner. They went downstairs to find George's mom cleaning the living room. Make your own breakfast, she told them. I have too much to do before our New Year's Eve party. I'm running around like a chicken without a head today. George cracked up. The idea of a headless chicken wearing his mother's bathrobe and slippers and vacuuming the living room rug was hilarious, but his mom wasn't in the mood to laugh. So George shut his mouth and walked towards the kitchen. Is it just going to be a bunch of grown-ups and us at this party? Kevin asked George. Nope, George said. I invited Alex. Oh. Kevin didn't sound too happy about that. Alex is a good guy, George said. It wasn't nice the way he bragged about maybe getting in the Book of World Records, Kevin said. George thought about mentioning that Kevin had been bragging about eating tomatoes too, but that would be the point. What would be the point? I'm sorry. After breakfast, I have to practice my karate, Kevin said as he poured himself a bowl of crunchy munchies. The tournament is tomorrow afternoon. Don't remind me, George mumbled as he shoved a spoonful of wheat wonkers into his mouth. What? Kevin asked. George swallowed his cereal. I, said, you don't need to remind me, George fibbed, because, what kind of guy would I be if I forgot about your karate tournament? A guy with one less friend, George thought quietly to himself, because no matter which friend he went with, come Wednesday, that was exactly the kind of guy he was going to be. Later that morning, before George's mom left for work, she warned him, Your dad came in late from the base last night, so he's taking a nap. Please don't wake him, and whatever you do, don't make a mess. We won't, George promised. Okay, so what do we do now? Kevin asked. You want to play video games? George suggested. Nah, Kevin said, I'm played out. The boys sat there trying to come up with a plan that wasn't messy or noisy. I'm hungry, Kevin said finally. But we just finished breakfast, George said. I know, Kevin said, but I can always eat. You got any tomatoes? I think there's a few left, George said. Cool, Kevin told him. Maybe we could chop them up with some marshmallows since you like those so much. George thought about that. That super burp had been a small one. Maybe the marshmallows had helped a little. It was possible that the more he ate, the less he'd burp. Then, to top the whole thing off with chocolate syrup, Kevin continued. A chocolate marshmallow tomato parfait. George wasn't sure what that would taste like, but he figured it would be fun to make. He went to the refrigerator, pulled out the tomatoes, then he took the chocolate syrup and marshmallows from the cupboard. I'll chop the tomatoes while you mix the marshmallows and the chocolate syrup, Kevin said. George nodded and poured what was left of the marshmallows into a big bowl. Then he squeezed the chocolate syrup container, but nothing happened. I can't get the chocolate out, George said. Squeeze harder, Kevin said. Here, let me try. Kevin took the bottle, squeezed, and squirt. Chocolate syrup flew out of the bottle. It was like all the chocolate in the bottle came out in one giant glob. But instead of landing in the mixing bowl, thick, gooey syrup splattered all over the floor, the counter, and the clean tablecloth. George's mom had put out that morning. Uh-oh, my mom's going to kill us if she sees this, George said. I'm sorry, Kevin said. We'll clean it up fast and just stick the tablecloth in the washing machine. Do you know how to use the washing machine? George asked him. Kevin shook his head. Me neither. And we can't wake my dad up, George reminded Kevin. He looked around the kitchen. How hard could it be to run a washing machine? Kevin said as he gathered up the tablecloth and headed to the laundry room. How much soap do you think we should put in? George asked Kevin a few minutes later as they stuffed the tablecloth into the washer. Lots, Kevin said. It's pretty dirty. Yeah. George poured in more soap. I think that half the box should do. He closed the lid and pushed the button that read wash. Immediately, the water began to pour into the machine. "We did it!" Kevin cheered. "Now, let's go clean up the rest of the mess," George said. They were wiping down the counters and the floors when George and Kevin heard some weird clunking noises coming from the laundry room. "Does your washer always sound like that?" Kevin asked. George shook his head. "Uh-oh," George screamed and pointed. The laundry room was knee-deep in a sea of bubbles. "This is bad," George cried out. "Maybe we put in too much detergent," Kevin said. "Gee, you think?" George asked him angrily. "Don't get mad at me," Kevin said. "You poured it in." "Yeah, but you told me to put a lot," George pointed out. He shook his head. "It doesn't matter. I have to turn this thing off." He walked towards the machine. "Whoa!" he exclaimed as he slipped and fell at the same time. Kevin slipped and landed on top of George. George scrambled from under Kevin and tried to crawl to the machine. "Where do you think the off button is?" "I don't see it," Kevin answered. "Just pull the plug." "I can't find the plug," George said. "What's going on here?" George turned around to the sound of his dad's booming voice. We got chocolate sauce on Mom's tablecloth and we knew she'd be mad and we tried to wash it. And George stopped mid-sentence. The rest was pretty easy to figure out. George's dad was shaking his head as he turned off the washer. But when he spoke, he didn't sound mad. "Come on, soldiers. We have to get this cleaned up before the water soaks through the basement. George, you go upstairs and get some towels. Kevin and I will start mopping." "I'm sorry we woke you, Dad," George said as he headed upstairs. "I actually wish you would have woken me up before you tried to do the laundry," his dad said. "Now get moving and find those towels. This cleaning up is going to take a while." Oh man, even without a burp, George just couldn't get away from bubble trouble. All right, guys, I'll see you tomorrow for chapter number 6. Have a great Thursday.